to be going over kind of the repair slash troubleshooting process that I have with my GPU mining rigs. I have a couple different mining rigs. As you saw, I have some AMD Radeon 7s. This is my 1080 Ti mining rig. It runs 12 EVGA 1080 Ti SC2 Hybrid GPUs. There's 12 water-cooled GPUs here. It was my first mining rig. I would say if I had to do it over again, I might not choose to go this route. It does have a little extra work, obviously, with all the radiators and the water cooling process, and you pay a little bit extra. But what I did notice is that I really save on heat. Especially the heat of the GPUs themselves, right? They can be in a room in a much higher temperature, especially here in Florida, that they stay a lot cooler longer than the air-cooled GPUs, your standard GPUs that you have. So it is a custom rig itself in a sense that I had to actually build the actual frame from scratch because they don't really make mining rigs tailored to have water cooling. I'll show you some snapshots and just a little bit of, kind of a close-up of how it's set up. But effectively, one of the GPUs stopped working on this one. I did the standard troubleshooting, which is to check the riser, because the first thing that goes bad is the riser in this one. It turns out that it's actually the PSU, the power supply. So we're gonna look at that process, what the kind of some of the struggles are with it, and also what new PSU that I'm going to be using with this for powering it. Sadly, certain situations are not covered by certain PSU manufacturers. In this case, it does not. So I'm no longer going to be purchasing this type of PSU, and I recommend against doing so yourself if you're worried about running across this problem. Here's a close-up. Effectively, you can see that I have 12 EVGA 1080 Ti hybrids. I do have one EVGA hybrid Kingpin. I had a hard time finding a 12th one, so I went ahead and just got the Kingpin just because it's very similar. It's a little bit larger and has a little bit higher of a power draw. It goes 2 8-pins instead of a 8-pin and a 6-pin, which does make life a little difficult, but not really. Effectively just stands up a little higher than the rest. With this, I had to actually purchase these metal frames from Home Depot, and effectively you'll see some lines that I did on these where I actually measured where each radiator is going to fit, drilled holes. I didn't align this one perfectly, so this is just kind of leaning on the frame itself, but hey, we're making it work. Effectively, I have one PSU powering the motherboard and 3 GPUs, and I have 4 GPUs, sorry, and then I have 4 and 4 on my server PSUs down here. Effectively, this is something that you have to do, or I could have multiple PSUs, sorry. But with these, you get a little bit simpler of a process. They're just continuous power. They're really power efficient. They're not the quietest. They don't make the least amount of heat, but hey, it's a mining rig, so it is what it is, right? With these guys, I rigged obviously 6 radiator fans with these on this side and 6 on this side, so they're both effectively pushing air outwards on both sides of this one, and they're pulling the air that's coming up from these out, right? So it's a process I just kind of put together. I really like the idea. It was cool. I really haven't seen anybody do this process like this. I've seen different people do an EVGA hybrid setup. I just really wanted to try it. It looked kind of cool, and hey, it works. It's been running for about a year now. I just really haven't had to do anything to it since about a year, and it's just the Silverstone power supply crapped out on me, sadly. So effectively, one of the GPUs are not getting power. It's really the the riser that isn't getting the power, but I have really no other way of powering it since I'm using every single slot that's available on that PSU. This is a 1500 Silverstone power supply. Effectively, if you have a PSU issue, normally this brand and model have a 3-year warranty. The only drawback is that they specifically do not cover if the actual port on the PSU burns out. Right, with this one is that we have 2 of the slots themselves have some damage on them. Most likely that damage occurred because when you power 4 GPUs from this type of PSU, you're normally okay if you have like a 4 PCI slotted motherboard, which those are not very common, obviously, but when you're going off of a riser system, you also have to power the risers. Now, risers get power from the actual SATA slots. Now, with this particular motherboard, you also have to power the CPU, which is obvious. We got the CPU slot there, but you also have to power it with the 4-prong adapters to the actual PCI Express slots that's on the motherboard itself. This is a ASRock BTC 10 Pro, BTC 10 Plus Pro or whatever, your standard 12 PCI Express motherboard, also 1 normal PCI slot, making it 13 total. Generally, most people only mind with 12, but technically you could do 13. Now, when you have that 2 extra plugs that you need to power with 4, that means that some stuff have to go to the same slot itself. You can even see when you look at this that there's a little gouge. You probably won't be able to see it from this with the lighting and the focus that it's having difficulty with. Let's see if I can get it to focus on it. Yeah, you can see the tiny bit of gouge right there. That is not from anything but burn. That's a really bad thing to happen to a PSU. Sadly, this is something that's not covered underneath the warranty of this. I'm still going to try, see if I can get away with it, but they're probably going to shoot me down and say, nope, you're out of luck, you kind of messed this up. Now, cool thing is we're switching to an EVGA 1600 T2 Supernova power supply. This is kind of a Mac Daddy beast. It's one of the most powerful power supplies EVGA makes. Roughly, I got it for about $307. Probably quite a bit of expense for most people. The reason I went with this is that, one, I got a really good deal on it. Normally these go for about $400. I found a sale on Amazon. Secondly, it's a titanium level power supply T2, meaning that its efficiency rate is like 63-64%, especially when you're running at 240 volts, which I am. It has about 100 more watts of power, so if, let's say, the issue that I had with the Silverstone was because I was overdrawing on it, which is, again, most likely unlikely, but with 4 1080 Ti hybrids, these guys can normally pull almost 300, even though that I do undervolt them. We may have had an issue with power issues, most likely. So what I went ahead and did was just added 100 more watts. I mean, this ran fine for about a year. But this one has a lot more slots available to you. So effectively, I can individually power every riser and individually power every single one of those ports, the 4-prong ports that I need on the motherboard itself. Now, this will make it so that I should not with overdrawing on individual ports themselves, because again, they each have a cap of what they can produce, and that's probably what